Hello, welcome everybody. This is uh this is the webinar or the Q&A session on finding your place in AI ethics consulting. My name is Shea Brown. I think probably a lot of you know me, and some of you, I think a lot of people from the course are here. And and if you want to ask questions, then just use the Q&A, or I think the Q&A is the right function to use. Um, but feel free to drop questions in there, and I'm gonna just sort of go through them as the webinar goes on. But my intention is just to try to answer as many questions as possible. So and I'm by myself today. I don't have my team with me, so I'll try to navigate the Q&A at the same time as trying to answer questions as well. So let me give you a little bit of context for those of you who may have just uh, popped in because you saw the post on LinkedIn. My name is Shea Brown. I'm the CEO of BABL AI. We're a company that audits algorithms for ethical risk, bias, and effective governance. Founded in 2018 by my I founded it in 2018. I've got a few co-founders now. And yeah, so during the process of growing BABL from 2018 to where it is now, which is not like it's not a massive company or anything. We're still, I would put us in the sort of boutique firm kind of scale. I think there was a lot of things that I learned along the way, and it was quite a struggle because in 2018 there was not really anybody. I wouldn't say not anybody, but in terms of business people, they were not really interested in talking about responsible AI for the most part, unless it was enterprise. A few companies at the enterprise level were sort of aware of the fact that they needed to be talking about this, and so they did. But then the rest of the sort of business world, it wasn't on their radar really. So it was quite a struggle to sort of have those conversations and talk and build the business in that way. And so as I started to build it, a lot of people asked me questions like, "Oh, how do you get into this field? It's very interesting." Um, Responsible AI or algorithm auditing, AI governance, AI policy, ethical AI, all of these things, like it's sort of a lot of overlap there. And so I think it was 2021, I decided to sort of put a course together, and I called it Finding Your Place in AI Ethics Consulting. And quite a few people have taken that course over the years, and it was just really simple, basic course, and some of you probably have taken it. Um, and so we offered it last month for free. So for the month of February said, come take it for free. And so quite a few people signed up, and quite a few people have been taking it. And even though I said I wasn't going to be responding to exercises that people posted, I have been reading them and I have been responding. Um, and uh, and so this is sort of the Q&A session to sort of answer any questions you might have about finding your place in AI ethics consulting. So I've got one question, which is, how do you get enrolled into the program, and is it still free? And the answer is it's not free anymore. We put it back. I think it's something like $99 or something. So we've taken that, we put it back into the sort of paid category. However, if you're here and you want to enroll in it, then let me know. So you can send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can, if you have my email, then you can email me, and I'll add you for free. So you took the time to show up to this, and if you missed it, then I'm more than happy to sort of add you into that course. So I've got another question here. So this one is, what are the key activities in which lawyers, so this is a lawyer, can support audits of artificial intelligence systems? Okay, this is an excellent question. And I think there are there are several ways in which lawyers are really, really, of course, well placed to do all of this work, because I mentioned this in the course. One of the primary activities of responsible AI. Well, like one of the primary things that I think we do when we work with clients is to identify risk. And risk management is something that lawyers do really well. They manage risk for their clients, and I think so. Just in general, so forget about audits for a second. Just in general, lawyers are very good and very important, and we work with a lot of lawyers. A lot of people who hire us, who reach out to us, are the general counsel of companies who are worried about the risks and trying to manage the risks of AI that their company are using. So that's pretty important. Now, in terms of supporting audits, I think uh, having a lawyer in uh, doing an audit at the uh, with a lawyer is can add a sort of layer of um, attorney-client privilege, which I think a lot of people want. And so a lot of times having lawyers in the room or making sure lawyers are on the calls is important for this process. And we almost always are talking to lawyers. And so I think if you're working with a client, it really should be you that's managing us doing an audit or whoever else you have doing an audit. So checking, ahead of time, it goes all the way from the contracting phrase, like making sure that the contractual terms are going to be appropriate for the client and appropriate for the audit. There are certain things that we can't budge on, and I'm sure other auditing firms can't budge on as well. But there are other things that a lawyer really should weigh in on behalf of their client during the contractual phase, and then making sure you're in all the meetings for like claims verification, things like this. So during the course of an audit, we have to be looking at a lot of very sensitive documents, and we will have claims verification where we're poking around very sensitive systems. And so it's good. Companies will want their lawyers to be part of that, just to make sure that everything is proceeding smoothly. So that was a very good question. All right, we got some more. So Jeffrey's on the line. Jeffrey's our COO, and so he's already got a coupon code for you if you want to join it for free. So I got another one. I'm very interested in the intersection of evidence-based practice, evidence-based medicine, responsible AI. Philosopher, before working in evidence practice. Okay. Okay, this is about pivoting into responsible AI. Okay. So philosophers are really good. So let's take the components one at a time. Being a philosopher is very good. We have a ton of philosophers. Like I think probably over half of the BABL staff have a background in philosophy. And the reason is that philosophers, especially analytic philosophers, but even continental, most branches of philosophy, the main point of what you're doing is to break down difficult problems into very simple steps and understandable and articulate what's going on. That is one of the most important things that we do when we're consulting, especially. And so philosophy is amazing. We love philosophers, and we'll probably always have a lot of philosophers working with us. And then evidence-based practice that's just a cherry on the top. I mean, I think having that kind of mindset is super useful. And so how do you pivot a career in responsible AI? So I think that's going to be advice. So let me move on, because I'm going to get back to that. I think the idea of pivoting is something that there's a general strategy for this that I think cuts across pretty much whatever your background is. And so I wanna kind of reserve that till I get a kind of a critical mass of this. So let me move on here. So this is about given the current passage of the AI Act, when auditing would be even more important, would someone who takes the 5 courses be able to audit companies deploying AI systems? And in consulting, how could one get the clauses for retention, etc.? Okay, so I think auditing is just starting to be a thing, right? And so the 5 courses that we offer, we put those together because we saw that there were specific skills that our auditors needed to have, and in those 5 categories. And though the purpose of those courses is like a level set for our team. That's what it was originally intended for. We released it for everybody else, and it became a kind of more of a thing. And we do offer certifications. It's not at the level where you take those courses and you can audit a company deploying AI systems right out of the box. And I think what you need is some mentorship. It's like a perfect set of sort of broad skills that I think are useful for starting that process. But ideally, you get somebody who's done it before, or you work as part of a bigger team. Like I wouldn't do it by yourself. Let me put it that way. I don't think you could, it would be like you can just go and just get the ball rolling. But if you had a background, let's say in other things, like if you were a risk professional or you were a lawyer or you worked as a model in model risk management, or you were auditing in a different area. So if you were an auditor for like ISO standards, or if you were an assurance professional, so you had like a assurance background, not insurance, but assurance, then I think the 5 courses would be enough to sort of get you to that level where it's like, okay, yep, I can probably go do that. But it will depend a little bit on the background. All right. We got a ton of questions. This is awesome. All right. So this is someone who's an attorney, uh, um, train AI, and own a legal tech company. What level of technical expertise does a lawyer need in this space, or does it really depend on what the role they are playing? Okay. So the technical, and so there's another one that's also a similar question. What are the potential roles qualitative user experience researchers and librarians can take on an AI audits and ethics? Okay, so let me address the technical versus non-technical thing. There are absolutely many things that we do, and that both in the audit space and in the consulting side of things, in responsible AI or AI governance or AI policy or AI audit, that are non-technical. In fact, most of the things that we do are non-technical in nature. So there's space for people who don't have like a super strong technical AI background, right? You don't have to be a machine learning engineer. You don't need to know Python to do most of these things. For the most part, though, you do have to have a broad awareness of what AI is, how it works. It runs on data. You have to understand kind of some of the core risks, like data can be biased. Algorithms can be biased because of biased data. Algorithms can be biased even if they have unbiased data, just the way they process things. And so there's some technical sort of baseline, and I think that's what so our course AI for AI ethics, that's not what it's called. It's called Algorithms, AI, and Machine Learning. That course, for instance, is meant to sort of set that baseline. Now, that course turned out to be harder because I'm a professor of astrophysics, and oftentimes I can't help myself, but I like the technical stuff. So I probably put more technical stuff in there that's needed. But you don't need that much. And most of the people on our team are non-technical. We have a lot, like I said, a lot of philosophers. We have lawyers. We have people who came from the social sciences, and they're not machine learning engineers or even close. And you don't need that, but it does help, and it does give a competitive advantage. So that being said, somebody on the team does need to be technical, and it does depend on the role. Okay, so let's move down. All right, somebody's asked about, can you describe the auditing process from a high level? Absolutely. So there are kind of two different types of audits that we do and we can do. One is very hands-on. And there's kind of two levels of of independence as well. So one's a straight up consulting engagement, which is where we're coming in as sort of impartial, meaning we're not part of the company, assessors of a system. And so this is where we do algorithmic risk and impact assessment or impact assessments. And the differences there are kind of nuanced, but we will assess the risk of the system. What are the ways the system could impact stakeholders, and then start doing technical testing of like, at what level does the system perform, and does it lead to risk? And that is, we just call that an assessment. I think a lot of people call that an audit, but if we're not independent, we might be sort of impartial in one way, and we're going to try, and we try to remain impartial when we do these assessments, but it's not really an audit. The second kind of audit is more of an attestation style, real formal audit. And this is the kind that we do for New York City, for instance. And that's where there's a standard, and the standard is the client has that standard, and the client has to do, or the auditee has to do certain things to meet that standard. And they will submit documentation to us saying how they are fulfilling that standard. And our job as auditors then is to assess that the statements that they have made actually live up to that standard, right? Do they sort of address everything at the right appropriate level? So that if they do, so let's say they do, normally they don't, and we have to go back and say, you didn't address this, so could you please revise? Then let's say they do get to the point where they have addressed everything. Then we have a claims verification process where we do a bunch of procedures to make sure that all of those things that they said they did, they actually did. And that involves all sorts of different kinds of procedures, anywhere from looking at data sets, having them recalculate things in front of us, like query it again. Sometimes we will recalculate it. Sometimes it's just sort of attestation on their part, like we ask them, you said you did a risk assessment, tell us about that process, and sort of attest to the fact that they actually did that. And then, of course, we have a lot of internal procedures around how we govern our process and come to an opinion. All right, that may have been, I don't know if that was too high level or not, or too low level, but I'll keep moving on. So someone asked about the AI risk management in the Department of Defense. So does our course support the CDAO Defense AI guide on risk? So the answer is no. I mean, it absolutely does, in the sense that there's a lot of alignment between what CDAO does, and we've talked to a lot of people there, and in fact, a lot of people at our company are very, I'd say, defense oriented, in the sense that they're military ethicists, they're AI ethicists, and they work on these issues with the government. And so we're very aware of that, but it's definitely more industry focused. And to the extent that the CDAO might follow NIST, a lot of what we have is sort of quite aligned with NIST. But the courses that we offer are much higher level than, I wouldn't say higher level. It's simultaneously very detailed, low level, very particular, and high level at the same time. So what do I mean by that? As you can imagine, and all of you know, there are a huge number of risk management frameworks that are coming out, right? NIST has their risk management framework. The EU AI Act has sort of a broad, requirements for risk management. The ISO 42001, has their AI management system, and all their risk management. There's COSO. There's all sorts of guidelines. And so what our course focuses on, because we're training auditors who are supposed to audit other people's work, I focus, when I sort of constructed that course, I really wanted to get kind of first principles, like what is risk management? What is a risk assessment? What are we trying to actually maximize for? What are the core kind of things that are germane to the enterprise of risk management? And understanding the resources available to bring to bear to manage risk and to assess risk. That's what we focus on. And the reason is that I want our auditors to be able to navigate all of those. So if they want to audit somebody because they follow the AI guide on risk from the CDAO, that they're not going to be surprised by anything that they see. That all it is a bunch of, people, the things that they do, and the tools that they use to do it. That is everything in an organization, basically. And some combination of those are used to drive down the probability that, or the uncertainty uh, that we have about events happening. And that's the enterprise of risk management is centered around that. So that's what those courses focus on. But then, of course, we have exercises that really ask you to sort of let's go deep in a particular thing, pick a particular framework or pick a particular control and start thinking about how that gets implemented, how you might audit someone else who's trying to implement that, for instance. Anyway, I'll try not to ramble, but I tend to ramble, so I'll keep going. All right, how important? So somebody else asked, how important is the location of living for consulting in AI ethics, both at BABL and for companies in the field? The location, all right. So for BABL, it's not important at all. We have people all over the world. We're very global. We get people. Jeffrey's coming in from Sweden. Hua lives in Vietnam. Ben, one of our ethics team, he's in Germany. We got people in Arizona, different parts of the U.S. We're all over the place. Africa, we're all over the place. And so in this day and age, it doesn't really matter, at least for BABL, right? So there might be other consultancies that are going to care a little bit more, but in my view, it doesn't really matter. Like you might have to have some jurisdictionally sensitive knowledge, right? And it may be easier to claim that you have that knowledge if you live in that area, but I think that that's not true and it's not necessary. Okay, so people are asking, Jeffrey, can you put my email in the chat for people or in the Q&A so they or wherever they can see it? Um, okay, and so everybody that's at this webinar, so people are asking about the code as well and the link to the course. Everybody who's in this webinar will follow up with links. We'll give you a code to take it for free, and we'll give you you can have my email and we'll give you a link to the course too. So we'll get that. So another question, is a particular approach or a special profile of participants necessary to audit artificial intelligence systems in public sector? Yes, I think that I strongly believe there is a particular profile. So we sort of break it down into kind of there has to be somebody who has some technical knowledge. So somebody needs to know AI systems because that's where a lot of risk lies in the system itself. So it could be anywhere from privacy or security risks to risks of bias and discrimination, and uh, parts of the sort of development process where risk can enter, where problems can enter. So someone who knows the technical, you got to have that, right? And so we always have a sort of very technical lead uh, that is focused on that. Somebody who's done this before has a machine learning background or an AI background and has done this kind of work. And you also, I think, need people who understand the regulations because regulatory risk, and that's one thing that like is different than when I offered this course the first time. When I offered this course the first time, the primary thing that we were getting called on to do, and I think a lot of consultancies were getting called on to do, was really focused around like reputational risk and liability risk. Like they're worried people were writing articles about AI systems being biased and this senatorial inquiries and all sorts of lawsuits, lots of exposure, sort of public scrutiny. Now it's shifted a lot more to people are just worried about regulations. Regulations are coming and they don't know. So in any case, on the audit team, having somebody who's kind of aware of that, who understands regulations and the standards. The standards is another big thing that's important. And I think that also a risk professional or somebody, not necessarily a risk professional, somebody who understands and has done risk assessments in this area, because a lot of what these audits have require us to do is to evaluate someone else's risk assessment. And uh, and the type of risk assessments that are done and are being asked for people to do in these new standards and these new laws are different than typical enterprise risk management, where it's much more outwardly focused. It's much more about fundamental rights. It's much more about external stakeholders. And so that's harder for uh, risk professionals that are used to following like COSO or an ISO framework. It's a little bit of a shift in mindset. And so having someone on the audit team who's done that before so that we can kind of dig into, is this good enough for what they've done? That's kind of important for us. And in the public sector, I think it's the same. It will be very similar. Of course, you need to know all the public sector regulations as well. Okay, someone asked about the discount code. Yep, we're gonna get that. So we'll send that email out. So some of them from a healthcare background and genetics and some legal background. If one would get into this field, what insurance coverage would you need to avoid malpractice? Yeah, so yeah, you need so I think there's gonna be a new type of insurance probably for AI for sure for the companies, and maybe some of you already know if there's new insurance offerings around AI risk. But for auditors, we have professional liability insurance, is of course going to be errors and omissions insurance is sort of a good blanket insurance right now. But my guess is that there will end up being some clever insurance companies are going to offer some specific insurance for these sort of AI audits. Okay, so another question is, can we share more information on common standards that you're auditing for the work you're doing in New York City? Yeah, so there aren't that many common standards. So I'm a fellow at For Humanity, which is a nonprofit that creates auditing standards. I mean, that's really what they do. They also offer some courses. And so, our auditors are certified sort of through For Humanity, their For Humanity certification scheme. But the standards that we're auditing against were constructed by us, which is not best practice. Like that's not what we kind of want to be, the realm we want to be working in. However, we kind of had to do it, and so we have a set of standards that we release publicly. So if you go look up BABL bias audit in New York City or whatever, you'll find we have public audit reports out there. And because the standards are not set in stone, we have to we don't have to. A lot of people don't, but we disclose everything publicly. Like what standards are we following? What are the criteria we're evaluating against? How do we evaluate against it? This will become much more standardized in the future. And we just recently founded the International Association for Algorithmic Auditing. We, like me, among other people, like Eticus is another company that sort of some of the founding members, a really good firm. And so we're going to try to sort of hone in on what those standards are. Now, in terms of like the process that we use for New York, we follow ISAE 3000, which is an assurance standard. And so when you see our audit report, it reads like an assurance report because that's really what it is. We're giving reasonable assurance that the company has done what is laid out in the criteria, and what is laid out in the criteria is the standard that we have laid out for what is an appropriate bias audit of those systems. Eventually, we're going to have much more clear standards, and hopefully that's going to happen soon. So somebody else is asking about a starting point. Let me keep looking here. So where to start? So I think this is one of those things that I think let me talk kind of in general here about this idea of pivoting. And I said I was going to come back to this idea, right? And people even mentioned this on LinkedIn. Like there's a ton of competition out there. Like it's become a thing. Like when I started doing this in 2017 is when I started looking into it, and I found BABL in 2018. There was not that much competition. Now, even then, the big consulting firms were pushing this narrative as well. And the question is, as an independent person or a small firm, how do you, or if somebody who's just interested in doing this, how do you like pivot? And I think the idea is that you have to gain the skills that are necessary to do what is required to do. And so in the course, we talk about kind of what are the types of things that we do. And I think in the course, I emphasize that the primary mode, the primary thing that we do is to identify risk and come up with solutions to mitigate risk. And I don't think that's changed since we did the course. However, I think that the type of risks have changed. So with the introduction of generative AI, the risk profile has changed a little bit. There's actually more kind of privacy and security risks related to generative AI. There's more reputational risks are different for sure. But regulatory risk has really come to the forefront. So what I mean by that is if you're going to get into the field now, the thing that you probably need to be doing the most is understanding in detail what the regulatory requirements are and what are the standards, because there weren't any standards really when we started. Now there are a lot more standards. So ISO has standards. The EU will have standards, but the EU, the law itself, has pretty specific requirements. There are a lot of state and local laws that have very specific requirements. And so if I were starting out right now, like just from scratch as an astrophysicist who didn't have anything to do with it, which is how I started out, I would find what are the requirements that I really need to understand on behalf of my clients, my potential clients, and just get really good at understanding those and get really good at communicating those. And I think that's where you can start generating traction is just pick something. And the idea of finding your niche, I think is huge right now because it's not that you can't. It's going to be very difficult for you to compete with other firms, other big consulting firms, or even small ones, and try to be like a jack of all trades. What you want to do, because there's so much noise out there. And so you have to kind of think about what is the thing that is your unfair advantage. If you have more of a technical background, then you're going to focus more on a particular technical aspect. Or if you have a law background, you might focus on that. Or if you are good at UX or something, or user interface, like there's a whole, you could have a whole business on understanding how to mitigate risk associated with people not understanding how the AI works and what it actually does, and so that the communicating through the user interface, how you would mitigate those risks and giving transparency. Like that's we've had to do that ourselves, working with people who have products where a big part of the risk is the person who's interacting with that user interface doesn't understand what it is that's happening in the background, and what are the kind of little nudges that we can put into place that are going to make that much clearer and incentivize them to make the wrong decisions when it comes to like turning knobs in an algorithm. So I think finding your niche is going to be very important to cut through that. Okay, I've got another one here. Can I clarify the situation where BABL has done a consultant engagement assessment and then an actual audit is needed? Can you actually do the audit as well versus hand it off to another entity in order to maintain independence? Yeah, so there's plenty of situations where this has happened, that we have done an assessment and we feel like that, well, it hasn't happened as much that we've done like a consultant engagement and when we felt like you got to get an audit. I think we're probably will run into that more, but it's definitely happened where we've gone in, they want an audit, and it's obvious that they need consulting. And so in those cases, we have to hand it off. We say, go get some help. Here's a list of people that could help you. You need to go get help. When you're ready, come back and we can audit you. Or alternatively, we can help you because we do that. We audit, we do consulting. We can help you, but then we just can't be your auditors. And almost always people, because audit is was, if that's the reason they came to us, that was the impetus. There's probably some external pressure to have an audit. They're would prefer to have us to be the auditors, and they'll go find the help, and they'll try to do it themselves. And so it's a tough balance, and I think we have to there are a lot of people we can't work with because we've consulted with them. And that's just the way it works, and that's fine. It's a big industry, so that gives other people who want to be auditors opportunity. Okay, so another person is asking, how big is the industry demand for AI ethics these days? I sense that it is not much more traction, that it's got much more traction in Europe and much chiller in Asia. How do the network get exposure to opportunities and customers in Europe? Yeah, that's a tough. So I'm not 100% convinced that Europe is like a slam dunk in terms of interest. You know, other people, you could comment in there if you want. Um, uh, we're seeing that there's actually the United States has more traction on the AI ethics stuff than Europe. That there's still a lot of European companies who are like not going to believe it when they see it that the EU AI Act is coming out, and they're not so much worried about the ethics per se. It's kind of a compliance thing. And in the United States, I feel like there was more reputational pressure early on. A lot of companies getting called out for things, and there's also because of that, the big enterprise companies are putting pressure on their vendors to do things. And so we're actually seeing a lot of activity in the US. Now, we're seeing much more now in Europe. Obviously, the AI Act has passed. That market is going to explode. Now, in terms of networking and getting exposure, I think uh, networking is going to happen on LinkedIn for the foreseeable future. Like until you get in-person events, right? Like you could go to in-person events and definitely showing up to conferences and things like that. I'm guilty of not doing as much of that as I should. My team keeps yelling at me for not going to more of these. But LinkedIn is kind of the place where you're going to network. So one of the unspoken things here is like, how is it that why am I talking to all of you now? Why do I have a company? Why are we successful? Probably not an insignificant fraction of that is because I have been very active on LinkedIn. Full stop. I spend a lot of time early on, especially trying to communicate on LinkedIn and learning on LinkedIn. And as I learned, I would share. And I think that any of you who are in this business, who are wanting to get into this business and are not currently in this business, that's one of the first things you need to do is to build credibility and to build visibility, because nobody's going to hire you if they don't know who you are. And you have to demonstrate somehow that you have, bona fides in this area. And one way of doing that is to go get some degree in it, which there aren't even really any degrees in this. There are adjacent degrees, right? You can go get a machine learning engineer degree, you can get a law degree that sort of specializes in this area or something. But for the most part, it's like you have to just demonstrate by putting out original thought and original content. And so I think if you are not on LinkedIn at the moment, talking about these issues in a really intelligent way and a strategic way, then you're missing out, because you definitely have to be there. That's where the networking will happen initially. And if you want to work in Europe, or if you want to target European companies, then you need to be on LinkedIn figuring out what are the companies that are fit my profile, and am I producing content or reaching out in ways that are going to get their attention. And if not, then you're missing out. They're not going to know who you are. And so that's something that I think is, as much as I did not like LinkedIn when I don't like social media, period. And I was very hesitant about that. And I realized that maybe a year in that I can't expect to build a business if nobody knows who I am and nobody knows my capabilities. And so I had to have a strategy I need to demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about. And so that involved like doing research, figuring out what working groups I can join so that I can have some sort of, affiliation with this new field that I was entering, and, uh, and then, and then, also, like, figuring out what working groups I can join so that I can have some sort of, affiliation with this new field that I was entering, and, uh, and then, also, like, figuring out what working groups I can join so that I can have some sort of, affiliation with this new field that I was entering, and doing research and publishing white papers, like doing some original work to kind of demonstrate expertise, and then broadcasting that on a place where people can see, like LinkedIn. Okay. Um, uh, so someone's asking, may I see the risk assessment of AI is similar to the combination of assessment of privacy, security, and ethics? Yeah, very much. I mean, I think any of you who are like privacy professionals, like this is 100% up your alley. And privacy is one of the risks associated with AI. So when I think about risk assessments for AI, where I think about like what is the thing that I'm doing most of the time, is that I'm looking at a socio-technical system that involves advanced algorithms, and I am looking at the ways in which they could impact the fundamental rights of the people who interact with them. And privacy is one of those fundamental rights. I guess, I mean, there's some cultural variance on that, but I think for the most part, privacy is considered a fundamental right. And, and so that kind of thinking, same thing with people who do human rights impact assessments. Like if you're a lawyer, human rights lawyer, or a lawyer that does, focus on civil liberties and things like that, that way of thinking is very, it's germane to what we do. And I think the transferability of that is, I mean, it's like directly applicable. The only difference is there are unique risks to AI. And as long as you understand those, then you can probably operate in the way that you've done before, just apply it to these socio-technical systems. All right, another question. An IT auditor with experience auditing AI systems and processes. What would you say are some common issues you come across? Yeah, so IT auditors are, yeah, we have a lot in common. I think the majority of what we focus on that's like slightly different is around the more socio-technical aspects, the socio parts of the socio-technical aspects. And so it's a lot more about um, what are the risks associated with how the system is presented. So transparency issues. And a lot of what we come across is the misunderstanding about what the system does. So I have some particular system which is going to assign some score, and then there's a person who's using the system who's going to take that score and take some action based on that score. One of the critical pieces is how much does that person understand where that score came from? Do they have sort of justifiable calibrated trust in what that score is? And how do we give that to them if it indeed is trustworthy? And that that's a kind of unique aspect that's a socio-technical. It's the interface of humans and the AI system itself. A lot of data, looking at data distributions, and so looking at how, like, a lot of statistics. What is the parameter space in which this AI system is sampling during the training compared to when it's in production, that kind of thing. But IT auditors are like, there's a whole infrastructure around that. We almost assume that that has been done, and it needs to be done because there's a whole bunch of stuff there that we don't really touch. We do have a sort of cybersecurity, roughly talk about security and that kind of thing, but it's not you know you need a cybersecurity professional, and you need an IT auditor to look at your system in terms, you want it to be robust. And we're looking at the edge cases where, how does the system kind of lead to infringements on fundamental rights? All right, here's a good question. What salary can you expect as an AI ethics consultant, especially when working from different countries? That's a good question. So it's going to depend. Like if you work at a big consultancy, you can expect a decent salary for consulting. So, if you look at All Tech as Human at the advertisements for the jobs that they have there, you can make six figures doing this. I think for the most part, if you're an independent consultant, it's really going to depend on your specialty and what you can charge. But I mean, I think you need to be, charging over $100 per hour for your work for sure would be standard. If you're an independent consultant where you own the company and you're charging that to the client, it can be higher than that. But if you're kind of working at a smaller consultancy, then it really the range is pretty high. So it can get fairly low. And in general, this is not like a super lucrative field. Like I think, especially the auditing thing, because people treat auditing like it's an expense that they don't want to pay for. And so, consulting is more lucrative than auditing. I enjoy auditing because I like the puzzle of it. I mean, I like consulting too, but I definitely auditing is more intriguing to me, and I think it's more of a lever for accountability in a lot of cases. But it's not super lucrative. Um, I think that if you work at a big company, and if you have specialized skills, especially more of the technical skills, people are willing to pay a lot of money, though. You can get well up into the six-figure range if you're working at one of the bigger ones. Do you have clients who carry out activities in Latin America, whether from public or private sector? It's not necessarily, but I'd just like to know if there's an interest in the matter thing. So yeah, so I mean, no. The answer is no. We've talked to a few companies in Latin America. Brazil is pretty active in this area, but it feels early to me. Now, it could also be because, we're North American and we're based in America. And so maybe we're just not seeing as much. But I think it's really starting to rumble now. Like I think there's gonna be a lot more going on in Latin America. But it feels like it's lagging a little bit in terms of whether people are willing to spend money on this. And it's gonna take another year or two before you really start seeing a ton of activity. I could be wrong. So if someone works in Latin America and is like, yeah, there's tons of activity, please let us know because that would be great. Let everybody in the chat know because that would be great. Um, uh, More information about on the team setup on a consulting or assignment project, team size and roles other than technical lead. Okay, so I mean, we have a lot of people who are just like communication. So the team size, so our team size tends to be something around like 5 or 6 people. Um, when we're doing it depends on the size. Like we've had as many as sort of like, I guess 7 or 8, and then with satellite people. But like for most of the time, five five people is enough, and you'll have the technical person. Um, you'll have a few sort of general consultants that have a background in like of law or just responsible AI in general. But then there are people who just are doing communication with the client and you don't need we've had people on consulting engagements who are essentially hadn't done it before. Like I think there's a role to play for people who are just starting out, if you can learn fast. And so just people who are good at communicating and good at writing. I mean, writing is a form of communication, but like just being a good articulator of, being able to boil things down that are complex into easy, simple things that can communicate well, that's super useful. And that's like half the battle oftentimes. Um, and so we typically will get people together. Like one of the very common themes in these kind of engagements is that we have a discovery process early on, and I'm sure there are got a lot of consultants on this call, and so you'll be familiar with this. It's like we have to first figure out what is it that the client is doing, because our primary goal is to identify those gaps and the risk and really understand what's happening. And so there's normally a very intense period early on where we're just talking to as many people as we can in an organization. And we often have kind of one or two people that are really meant to be like in every single meeting, and they're going to be the ones who kind of have to absorb. We call them the knowledge owner in our firm, but it doesn't matter what you call them. And then once we sort of figured out that we think we got everything mapped out pretty well, then we have a risk assessment. That's like the big meeting where it's like whiteboards, figuring out what's happening, what are the risks, who are the stakeholders. This is where, if you take our risk assessment course, for instance, we go through this whole process in that course. Really mapping out what are the harms or fundamental rights that could be infringed upon for which stakeholders, what are the causes of those or the potential causes. So what are the parts of the socio-technical system that could give rise to those harms? That takes a long time. Once we have that, and we have to think about what's our credence, what's our certainty about this? Do we need to find out more information? But once that process has been mapped out, then it's like, once you know the cause, you have a lever on that risk. And so for mitigation, so we can figure out if we can drive down the probability of this happening if we just reduce the false positive rate, or if we educate this end user about making sure they don't, they don't forget to check this one thing, that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm probably rambling here, so I'll keep moving. So somebody is okay, good. So that's I'll follow up with that. On how to do UX. So somebody's asking about UX risk management. So yeah, so the process I just described, oftentimes that's where it comes in. It has to be holistic. Like normally you don't think about just, I'm going to look at the UX and assess risk kind of in a vacuum. I think what it comes from a much more holistic process, but it oftentimes that user experience, the user interface is a place where risk, like we have it on our list of things we need to discuss. Like it's important enough that we don't want to skip discussing that. But it has to be holistic, and it has to do with what are the critical pieces of information, what are the levers for that risk, what's going to cause that risk to happen. So an example might be that there might be a lot of knobs that a person can turn when they're using an AI system. Like they can select all sorts of things, and oftentimes when you build a product, you want to give them tons of options, right? Well, some of those options during the course of the risk assessment turns out that it's going to be much riskier than others, right? But you still want to give them those options. And so what are the ways in which you want to educate the user, like right in the user interface, to flag to them that that's a potentially risky option for this reason, right? Or, be able to give them the reasons without interfering with the user experience. Or how do we disincentivize it? And yeah, and there's a bunch of methodologies that you want to make it easy, all the user experience stuff and behavioral psychology, like for kind of understand how that gets, but it has to be holistic. But it is a super important part, and I think there is user experience and risk around that is an important part of this whole process. Okay, somebody's seen some software solutions coming out for auditing and monitoring. Do you foresee opportunities where experts like yourself become experts with some of these software solutions and act as a reseller? Add that to your revenue stream. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think we're talking and partnering with a lot of these platforms. Like we're in conversations, I think probably with almost all of them. I mean, so many are coming out now, and I think they're going to need experts. All of these platforms. I think there's a significant one thing I could say is that if you get good at these sorts of things, education there's gonna be a need for many years to educate people on these topics, because right now it's like there are so many gaps, and we deal with so many companies where it's so obvious that they don't have the capabilities internally to think about these issues in a way that's like robust, right? They might have really great people that are really good at even risk management or good at data science, or quality lawyers, but there's a set of sort of capabilities that are hard to come by and are very sort of multidisciplinary, and it takes practice and it takes deliberate effort to get good at them. And people just haven't yet because we're still figuring out what are those things. And so I think that all of the people using these tools have to have, they're not going to be effective if they don't have some of those capabilities, and so either they need assistance or they're going to need that education. So either direct kind of consulting assistance or education. And so I think there has to be an interplay there. And for sure we're thinking about that. And that's part of our long-term plan is to interface with those tools. Netherlands. So somebody's from Netherlands. Yeah, Netherlands is very active. Do we have clients there? Not in the Netherlands. We have clients who have dealings with the Netherlands, and so we've had to deal with authorities in the Netherlands. I'll just leave it at that. And but yeah, we don't have any Dutch clients at the moment, like any that are headquartered in the Netherlands. But the Netherlands, of course, given that the big scandal that had the government got overturned because of like there's a lot of activity there, and it's a pretty vibrant economy. And so I think that there's a ton of work, and the Netherlands will be a very central country for that. It seems that an audit team, so another question, seems that an audit team needs to be very interdisciplinary with legal, machine learning, engineering expertise. What about domain expertise like health-related use case? The context is very important. Yes. So I'm glad you brought this up. This is one of those. So the answer is yes. And you can't just come in from the outside and not know what the AI is being used for and have domain knowledge and do this. And so we have to, either it's areas where we have a lot of domain knowledge, like ed tech and things like that, where we have a lot of experience, or in hiring where we have experience now. But when we go into an area where we don't have a lot of experience, we have to bring in somebody who has subject matter expertise, or rely on the subject matter expertise of the clients. But I think you got to have that. And in medicine, it's for sure true. You have to be able to understand what's going on. And so I want to bring this back because when we're talking about finding your niche and where are you going to make your impact on this field, go where you have an unfair advantage. And if you have subject matter expertise in something like the medical field or whatever, niching down and be very specific around that particular subject matter is going to get you a lot more traction. And I think that because it is important, and I think it will cut through the noise more than just being general responsible AI talk. The recording will be available. Yeah, and yeah, as a high stakes AI system. So yeah, in general, all of these, like if you're niche down an area where it's going to be high risk, and you can use the EU as sort of their list as one potential list. But any place where there's consequential decisions made about humans, and AI is being used there, if you have domain expertise there, and I think that's a place where you can make impact, and you can it can be a place to grow a consulting career around. All right, we are now at time. Sorry I talked a mile a minute, but I'm glad there are so many questions. We will send a recording out of this. We will also send and we'll send an email. We'll send the course code. We'll send a link to the courses. We'll probably even give some discount if you want to take some other courses as well. Thank you so much for showing up to this, and thank all of you who took the course. And we really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to take that course and to come and hear me blab on about this stuff. So thank you very much.